The Book of Daniel, chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babel. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent forth to gather together the nobles, the princes, and the dukes, the judges, the receivers, the counselors, the officers, and all the governors of the provinces, that they should come up to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So the nobles, princes, and dukes, the judges and receivers, the counselors, the officers, and the governors of the provinces were assembled unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, Be it known to you, O people, nations, and languages, that when ye hear the sound of the cornet, trumpet, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all instruments of music, fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. Whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a hot fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the cornet, trumpet, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all instruments of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down, and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. By reason whereof at the same time came men of the Chaldeans and grievously accused the Jews. For they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, trumpets, harps, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all instruments of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever falleth not down and worshippeth, that he should be cast into the midst of an hot fiery furnace. There are certain Jews, whom thou hast set over the charge of the province of Babel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thy commandment, neither will they serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image that thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his anger and wrath, commanded that they should bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, What disorder? Will not you, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, serve my God, nor worship the golden image that I have set up? Now therefore are ye ready, when ye hear the sound of the cornet, trumpet, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all instruments of music, to fall down and worship the image which I have made? For if you will not worship it, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a hot fiery furnace. For who is that God that can deliver you out of mine hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king and said, O king Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. Behold, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the hot fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known to thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of rage, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he charged and commanded that they should heat the furnace at once, 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he charged the most valiant men of war that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and cast them into the hot fiery furnace. So these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their cloaks, with their other garments, and cast into the midst of the hot fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was straight, that the furnace should be exceeding hot, the flame of fire slew those men that brought forth Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the hot fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Who answered and said unto him, It is true, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then King Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the hot fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the servants of the high God, go forth, and come hither. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. Then the nobles, princes, and dukes, and the king's counselors came together to see these men, because the fire had no power over their bodies. For not an hair of their head was burnt, neither were their coats changed, nor any smell of fire came upon them. Wherefore Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants, that put their trust in him, and have changed the king's commandment, and yielded their bodies rather than they would serve or worship any god save their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak any blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be drawn in pieces, and their houses shall be made a jakes, because there is no God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babel. Nebuchadnezzar king unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the world, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Daniel chapter 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, being at rest in mine house, and flourishing in my palace, saw a dream, which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of mine head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree, that they should bring all the wise men of Babel before me, that they might declare unto me the interpretation of the dream. So came the enchanters, the astrologians, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, to whom I told the dream, but they could not show me the interpretation thereof, till at the last Daniel came before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, which hath the spirit of the holy gods in him. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of enchanters, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream, that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Thus were the visions of my head in my bed, and behold, I saw a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great, a great tree and strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the ends of the earth. The boughs thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. It made a shadow under it for the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh fed of it. I saw in the visions of mine head upon my bed, and behold, a watchman and an holy one came down from heaven, and cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree, break off his branches, shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit, that the beasts may flee from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, with a band of iron and brass, bind it among the grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts among the grass of the field. Let his heart be changed from a man's nature, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times be passed over him. The sentence is according to the decree of the watchman, and according to the word of the holy ones. The demand was answered, to the intent that living men may know that the Most High God hath power over the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and appointed over it the most abject among men. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Therefore thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to show me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, held his peace by the space of 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. And the king spake and said, Belteshazzar, let neither the dream nor the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. The tree that thou sawest, which was great and mighty, whose height reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof through all the world, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven did sit. It is thou, O king, that art great and mighty, for thy greatness is grown and reached unto heaven, and thy dominion to the ends of the earth. Whereas the king saw a watchman and an holy one that came down from heaven and said, Hew down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, with a band of iron and brass binding it among the grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over it. This is the interpretation, O king, and it is the decree of the Most High which is come upon my lord the king, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as the oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High beareth rule over the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. Whereas they said that one should leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall remain unto thee. After that thou shalt know that the heavens have the rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by mercy towards the poor. Lo, let there be a healing of thine error. All these things shall come upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months he walked in the royal palace of Babel, and the king spake and said, Is not this great Babel that I have built for the house of the kingdom of my power and my might, and for the honor of my majesty? And while the word was in the king's mouth, a voice came down from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee be it spoken, thy kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as the oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou knowest that the Most High beareth rule over the kingdom of men, and giveth it unto whomsoever he will. The very same hour was this thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as the oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown as eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of these days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding was restored unto me. And I gave thanks unto the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose power is an everlasting power, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and according to his will he worketh in the army of heaven, and in the inhabitants of the earth. None can stay his hand, nor say unto him, What doest thou? At the same time was mine understanding restored unto me, and I returned to the honor of my kingdom. My glory and my beauty was restored unto me, and my counselors and my princes sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and my glory was augmented toward me. Now therefore I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and magnify the King of heaven, whose works are all truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase.